Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Cynthia Lawson Jaramillo. I'm the director of the Deed Research Lab and delighted to welcome you to today's La Hora, which coincides with International Workers' Day. And delighted to be here with you all. We don't have a particular guest today, and so you all are my guests in today's conversation. And I'm happy to hear what questions, thoughts, comments, works in progress, feedback that may have brought you here today. Perhaps for some context, I could share that in the Deed Lab, we've been quite insistent on models that really center artisans and their sustainable livelihoods within the artisan sector. And we're particularly preoccupied with the default business models established by designers, entrepreneurs that that perhaps don't necessarily center the artisans, that don't necessarily generate sustainable income over time, and that therefore strip them away from some of the rights that they might have as workers in other contexts. And because of today's, today being May 1st, which is globally acknowledged as a Labor Day, I can share in the chat a link to an article that I co-authored with economist Raphael Schaap, where we really look at, unpack, and detail and study the artisan sector as an example within the gig economy. In the lab, we did a study in 2012 called Fair Craft, and one of our findings was that the vast majority of artisans are paid by piece. That means that if they don't work, if they're not able to, if they're sick, if they're mourning within their communities, or if they simply need to prioritize other kind of labor in their lives, they don't necessarily generate an income. And so that really is, by definition, the way that the gig economy has been established. Celebrated on the one hand because it offers flexibility to a worker, not only flexibility in terms of where we work, but when and how much we work. But on the other hand, we also see a rise in labor organizing. Here in New York City, the Deliverista movement really trying to bring more rights to the delivery workers, not just in terms of wages, but even like where they can use a clean toilet during their workday as people who deliver us our food. And so there's that invisibility of a labor force that happens within the gig economy that supports many of our apps that we so enjoy, that give us great flexibility, access, and especially convenience. But that underlying those are these forces, especially around workers' rights, that that are quite problematic. So that's what I'm bringing today on International Workers' Day to this space, and I'm happy to do a round. And so if it's your first time here, I will just go around clockwise on my screen. I'll call on you and you can share if you have a particular question or thought that brought you here today. You could also say that you're simply here to listen and learn, and that is also fine. So we'll start doing that. I'll drop the link in the chat to the article that I was mentioning, and welcome you all here today. Thank you for being here. So Daniela, I'll start with you. What brings you to La Hora today? Do you have a particular question, a thing that you want to share?
Yeah, hi, nice to meet you and to be here with you all. Um, yeah, I'm new to this space. I think I joined in a few weeks ago by way of a flyer. I'm at the new school. I'm a Parsons student. I'm just about to complete my first year of the MA Fashion Studies program. And I have, yeah, a large interest, research interest of mine is cultural sustainability, looking at ways that we can kind of turn towards respectful co-creation with indigenous textile communities and artisans. So yeah, I just feel really resonant with the work that Deed Lab is doing, and would love to know a little bit more how that might intersect or cross-pollinate with my own research interests. I'm hoping to travel this summer to Peru to volunteer at a textile center there, which may inform some of my thesis work for next year. So yes, love everything that Deed Lab is doing, and would love to know more how I could, yeah, get involved.
Fantastic. Thank you for finding us. Thank you for coming. And yeah, maybe when we come back to detailing some of what is shared, we can maybe together offer up some particular questions that you can bring with you to Peru as you embark at that potential for fieldwork research. So thank
Yeah,
you.
I would love that. Thank you.
Next on my screen, I see Pame. Hi, Pame. Welcome back.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Okay,
How are you?
good. I was confused by the hour, but it's okay. And no, I'm glad to stay here once again in La Hora. And I'm just here just for learn. I'm social anthropologist. I live in the Yucatan, so nice to meet you and very happy to share with you in this day.
Thank you, Pame. Thanks for making the time. Tatiana, welcome back.
Hi, I just saw the email this morning and I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna connect and just listen. I just always learn so much, and it gets a lot of questions about my practice for I'm an artist, I'm a visual artist, interdisciplinary artist, and yeah, I'm just love, and my background was as a graphic designer, so I think that I find this space very interesting because it just kind of connects into so many different medias and ways of working around the challenges that that are being presented, of wanting to bring together and incorporate indigenous knowledge into practices, but also how to do that from a place of not being condescending or assuming that there is a help to be needed to create those spaces, but also to just kind of have an awareness of how to bring those conversations. So it's very interesting to see all the places from where people have been working, how they've been doing it, and learning from everyone else's practices. I don't have anything particular today. I'm just going to listen to everything. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for being here. Una, do you have a particular interest, question, thing that brought you here today?
No, I'm just already very happy to be here. I work in the e-commerce space with two fair trade companies. And I work with Navica, and we are launching handmade.com. We hope to restore for artisans what Etsy said they would originally do, which is get rid of all the rubbish on the site. But it's good to just be sitting here for a few minutes and thinking about roots and how I wound up where I am, and hearing issues raised about the gig economy and all of that sort of thing. I started out as a conceptual artist, experimental filmmaker, but eventually you have to earn a living. And it's very, very hard, I think, for creatives, because a lot of us don't respect so much what we can do in terms of even creative thinking. And so it's also an area that companies think they should not have to pay for, particularly with respect to, I think, Tatiana, you mentioned being a graphic designer, that there are so many places like Fiverr that are just devaluing creative work. So I just want to listen and learn, and also see if there's anything I have that I can bring to the discussion. Or maybe we can bring, meet people that have some of the same interests as I do, and how we can combine those two things: earning a living, respecting everything that's out there in terms of what we're trying to preserve. Indigenous crafts, indigenous artisans, but at the same time, let them earn a decent living.
Thank you, Una. Already a lot that you're sharing with us that is exciting. Perhaps we can, in a few minutes, come back to you and you could share a bit more about handmade.com. That sounds really exciting. Thank you for being here.
Thank
Shamika?
you.
Shamika, any particular thing brought you today? Hi.
Hi everyone. So I think I've only been on here once before, and so I'm an architect and also teaching at Parsons, teaching interior design studio, and I've been working on a project for a few years with artisans in India, or I've been working on research rather for a project, and I've been trying to find kind of languishing craft that maybe needs support in the form of infrastructure, or in the form of just something as simple as an architectural space so that they can work. And I'm currently potentially working on a project in West Bengal, in a village in West Bengal, where they do have a languishing craft. And there are just a few weavers. There happens to be a master weaver who's very keen on supporting the other weavers in the village. And he's actually offered space. So he has a house with some space around it. So he's actually offered that space to build a dyeing unit and then potentially a weaving unit. So right now, the artisans are actually having to cycle to the next village to get yarn dyed, which is very challenging for them. And they don't really have any space to dye to basically dye their yarn. And so we're looking at trying to start off this project with just the dyeing unit, so they have some, immediate results with that. And I'm working with a partner in West Bengal who's actually a textile designer, and we've been communicating for a few years now, and COVID kind of put everything on hold, but he's we're working together to try to improve the situation in this particular village at the moment. But yeah, my research has taken me to lots of different places in India, and so some of the places I visited were very well established and were places to learn from, and then this is the place where they really don't have that much support. So we're starting off with this dyeing unit. Basically, we're building a dyeing unit in Shantipur in West Bengal.
Fantastic. Perhaps we could return in a few minutes and talk a bit about what might be those infrastructures that need to be in place. Yeah. Exciting. Thank you so much for coming back. It's nice to see you.
Thank you.
Shreya, do you have a particular thing that brought you here today?
No, nothing particular. Just it's really nice for me to learn about all the crafts from around the world. And the time kind of suits me. It's evening, almost it's night in Delhi. Namaste. So I get to do my walk while I listen to everyone, and it's a quick way of learning. And I'm also involved in a bunch of different projects related to craft and handmade things. So maybe most recently working on jewelry designs, but also trying to examine from the point of view of artisans who are not in the mainstream at all, the kinds of challenges they're facing due to mechanization and different technologies, which are probably very, very, very difficult for them to engage with. I'm sort of specifically right now looking at refugee populations who make arts and crafts for a living, but due to their education background and levels and probably the incomes available to them, they're not able to access technologies in the ways that many of us are used to. So I just keep coming back because I learn a lot through these.
Always nice to have you. Thank you, Shreya. So nice that you're walking while listening. Vincent, do you have a thing that brought you here today?
Yeah. I hope my camera is working. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's good to see you, Cynthia. I am just joining in because, I graduated from IDC in 07, and this is a good way for me to connect back with the program and the school, and it kind of reminds me of the work and the education that I received. And, as now I'm a product designer in digital experience specifically, but I used to work in textile design, so I'm very familiar with the artisanal and the artisan kind of process. And I always find this particular conversation, La Jolla, very interesting because of the intrinsic dichotomy between our conversations, such as craft and artisanal, and how does that fit into a production and commerce kind of scale in our capitalist system, right? And so it's all very interesting to me. And I'm currently actually reading Buckminster Fuller's Universe by Lord Stephen Sidon. And, it's very interesting for him, just his perspective of living in the turn of the century, last century, and going into industrialization, and how kind of the systems and people processes all kind of changed throughout that system. And now we're seeing it again. And I think that's very cool kind of thing. And I guess another thing I could offer is that, and I haven't seen it yet, but I mean to go, which is there is an exhibit at the Met called Weaving Abstraction in Ancient and Modern Art. And it is a exhibition that invited I think some contemporary artists to kind of see how they created art with traditional Andes kind of weaving technology. So that's something worth visiting if you guys are in the city.
Maybe we could organize a field trip and a group of us could go.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love that.
Wonderful. Let's make it happen. And finally, Daphna, do you have a particular thing that brought you here today? Well, Daphna, if you can hear me, we can't hear you. So maybe I'll ask if Laura wants to share anything, and then we'll go back to a round. Hi, Laura.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Sorry, I joined late. I just finished class.
No worries. We were just doing a round of people sharing what brought them to this space today.
Yeah, so I'm working on my capstone project, which is the thesis project for my graduation. And I'm doing it about the I'm creating a tool to increase the perceived value that our society has for Colombian artisans. And after lots of research, interviews, and lots of work, I created a brochure, almost like a guide. It's going to be both physically and digitally. And the idea is that international people that go to Colombia or that are simply interested in learning about the culture, supporting artisans, crafts, and in general conservation of the heritage can learn about context about what's happening, the current situation of Colombian artisans, how can they increase their perceived value. And yeah, I can share my my brochure prototype, and then you guys, if you want, can give me feedback and let me know your thoughts for improvement or whatever you consider that could help me to make this a better idea. So let me share my screen. Also, if you have questions, you can ask them. Feel free.
Fantastic.
So here it is. These I can wait. Try to present. I don't know if I. So it's called Colombia's Artisan Renaissance, guiding change through perceived value. The idea is that these brochure will be, for example, will be like a partnership with different companies. So for example, in American Airlines, they're going to give out this brochure in their airplane seats so that when international people enter the country, they can like read it, or even like with hotels in the city that already like in different cities of the country that are already like supporting somehow like the artisan sector can also give out these to like the clients. Sorry, not the clients, like tourists. So it's divided into like 4 different spaces. This is like context and history. So talking a little bit about the artisans. I don't know if you want me to like leave this for a second for you guys to read or just like kind of like show it more briefly.
Well, it's so small that we can't read it at all. So you could either zoom in and allow us
Is
to
it
read it,
better?
but maybe you could do a full overview and then we could go back.
So this is basically like context and history. It talks a little bit about like how the craft have evolved from like indigenous to like popular crafts and then to contemporary or what's happening right now with like modernization. These are some facts about like how many artisans are in the country, how most of them use natural resources or organic to create their crafts, how they mostly live in rural areas and are indigenous. So it's a little bit of context of what's happening. This is going to be like additional booklet that it's going to be in the brochure just for context with like Colombia's departments, regions, and the different crafts and the percentages of the most popular type of crafts. And this is talking a little bit about the preservation and the value of our current society. So it talks about how we are changing, like our consumers are shifting for well, they first wanted like more fast produced items, like very cheap, and then we're actually transitioning into like wanting to like support like different causes and like buying artifacts that are tied to like a impactful purpose. So I talk a little bit about that shift and the importance of conserving like these artisan crafts and their culture and their history. And yeah, it's a little bit about information about like how it's really important to build like transparency and trust, and then how this is basically like the third part, which is basically like the guide or like simple tips that people can use to increase their value or like support them. Some of them are like ensure to give them like proper representation if you're buying them, or like if you post on social media, like make sure that you actually like tag them, explain everything really well, that if you're consuming, actually consume directly from the artisans, try to avoid like third parties, either like designers or stores that don't represent them well, and like for example don't ask for lower prices, so it's very like easy. And then this last part, it's basically digital space where I'm going to include different like resources to expand this initiative. So it's going to include like shops that actually like support artisans. It's going to include like, for example, workshops. If these artisans are giving like different classes, where can you sign up, help them? If you want to contact an artisan directly, it's going to have like a directory with this. So it's basically what I have. Sorry if I was too fast.
No need to apologize. That was it was a quick overview. Maybe before we open it up for feedback, I certainly have a lot of thoughts I could share.
Yeah.
Could you share with us, Laura, what you hope the long-term impact of this would be? So let's say the brochure is on all international flights arriving to Colombia. What would you hope will be different in 5 years or in 10 years?
So I feel that for this project, the idea is basically like a mindset shift. It's more idea of changing like the mental model that our society has. It's great to like buy crowds, but it's more than that just. It's about the idea that artisans are not just crafters, but they're people that carry like a whole legacy that is being lost if we don't support these causes and if we don't support what they're creating. So it creates basically like this cycle of undervaluation if they are not like supported both economically, but also in general, the perception that we have of them. So I hope that with this, it's going to work as a basically like as an awareness tool. And yeah, I feel that in the future I could expand into maybe creating like a certification for brands to to partner with artisans in an ethical way, and this would help also like international tourists to be 100% sure that where they're purchasing or the causes that they're supporting are 100% like ethical and those things. But in summary, I just want this to be like an awareness campaign as of right now, and expand as much as possible the idea that not the idea, but like the importance of supporting and conserving these legacies.
Wonderful. Thank you. And why this word, why are you choosing the word Renaissance?
Well, I feel that it's because it's like a rebirth of the appreciation, because so after industrialization and like as we started moving into like fast paced, we started losing a lot. We started losing the value for things that are handcrafted, slow produced. And I feel that we are shifting, especially after COVID and after we started like being interested again into like sustainability and ethical life, I would say. Uh, yeah, I feel that it's almost like a rebirth of starting as a society to value these artisans and these crafts. So that's why the title is Renaissance. It's like a new opportunity to rethink our consumer choices and our causes.
That's fantastic. And it in some ways I wonder if the Renaissance needs to be about consumption and not necessarily about the artisans. Because when you describe it, you're saying it is about shifts in consumption. And so I wonder, is this really about an artisan or craft rebirth? Or is it about a call for a radical shift in how consumers buy and bargain and consume handmade artisan craft? So that could be one place to think about, because the cover is so important in terms of how you're inviting a new reader in. Well, I invite everybody who might have a comment or a question for Laura, please, you could raise your Zoom hand. It's under the React button that now has a heart icon on it on the bottom of the screen, or you can also type into the chat. Some feedback I could share, Laura. I love the how you've handled the imagery. So I think you're really celebrating the communities with let's say with deep respect. I'm somewhat concerned about the image on page 2 of these two people who look like Indigenous people, and not sure I would necessarily have them so front and center without their permission, because you're overlaying it on pre-Columbian imagery that can also be quite sacred. So I would just be careful with that, and really encourage you to maybe take a look at that choice critically. And this view of it really confirms the other comment that I had, which is, it won't be a surprise to you, I am most excited by page number 12, right? The guide. How are you going to guide people towards more ethical ways of relating or buying or being in Colombia and with craft and with communities? How might that occupy a much greater space within your booklet? Because right now, hierarchically, it's simply one of 12 or 10 pages of content with the front and back cover. So how might that have a greater importance? Because in fact, this renaissance that you're describing, or the change that needs to happen, would be thanks to the content on that particular page. So I think I like the tone, the imagery, the way you're introducing it. I also appreciate the design seems to have these standalone pages, so it makes it as more of a reference booklet, not necessarily something I have to read from front to back. But I want to encourage you to maybe bring more substance through how you end up resolving the visual design and hierarchy of the booklet to that page number 12.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see two hands, so we'll go to Una and then to Tatiana. Una?
Laura, very nice presentation. I really like that you're a lot with it.
Thank you.
Yes, has the airline already agreed to put that in the seat pockets?
No, this is just like a project right now. So I haven't like spoken to them. This is just like ideas, or to give you like context of where I'm planning to pitch these if I ever like pitch it. So no, it's not like a real project. It's more like a school project. But yeah.
Okay, I wanted to ask that too because of the same question about Renaissance. It's a funny word right now, and I was actually in a meeting a couple of weeks ago with a fairly well-known New York agency pitching us on something, and they wanted it to be a Renaissance. And a couple of people on our team were loving the Renaissance. And then the last person on our team that I expected to be on the same side as me was our technical person, primary technical person. And he said, I don't know about Renaissance. And I said, I'm really opposed to it because I think that, and he said, well, you're saying that Beyonce did it. And I said, yes, but Beyonce's already ditched it and she's in country now. I think it's a really risky term. And while we all really love the concept of a rebirth and a return to the classics and some of the values of the Greeks and the Romans, it was a very exploitive time. It belonged to the wealthy. And the position that artists and artisans were able to have during the Renaissance, yes, they were perhaps paid with stipends and commission to do works, but the rest, anyone below that status was probably not able to eat. It's and very much a movement associated with the upper class, with the Medici. And so for you to pitch native or indigenous crafts as a Renaissance, I think there's a disconnect. I think that what's the crafts, native or indigenous, the word of the day, which one are we using? I don't know. Crafts as a Renaissance belies the fact that they've never had their birth, let alone a rebirth. You know, they still need to be introduced to people that will perhaps purchase them or support them. So I would give very serious consideration to that word because it could compromise your whole project. That's my take on it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really appreciated. And I would definitely reconsider changing it.
Thank you, Una. Tatiana?
Una, what you just said was very well said, and I was gonna talk about the problematics that I see with Renaissance also as a connecting. I think that as Colombians, we need to really disconnect from the European view and any European perspectives. I think that I have a problem also with the second image, because it places indigenous culture as something that it's to be other, so it's to be observed from like the window of a museum. And that is very problematic, because they're in Colombia, indigenous people are not only in the rural areas, they're in the cities, they're working. And I think that this othering of indigenous people is one of the main issues that happens around arts and crafts. I think that, so I would say that like seconding Cynthia, the page 12 is very strong. And I almost feel that that's a page to start with. Like that's something that, and it made me think about a few residencies as an artist I've been to. And I just recently, I'm going to Santa Fe, and they send a document that it's all about how you need to behave, and how, like, what's the code of ethics amongst the people? How do you talk to people? How do you, all these things that were introduced that were very, very interesting, you know, how to approach the community, how, and I think that in another residency that I did, they did the same thing. And when I see the page 12, that's the thing that I think that is the most important about coming to Colombia and seeing, because I think that even us as Colombians living in another place and then coming back places in a place of privilege. And I think that it is very important for people to understand that difference of privilege and how to play a role around that. And I would encourage you to like work more and what are those methodologies to approach people, but also maybe work with a few artisan communities to hear what they want to say and how they want to be portrayed and placed as them.
Thank you so much. This is all very interesting and valuable.
Thank you, Tatiana. And I'll read the comment from Shreya in the chat. It would be very useful to sort of make a mapping of the ways in which you can connect craft economically. So very, very practically, what this Renaissance posits to achieve can be represented in a flow chart, and that would really help your project. Just as a logical way of assessing it for yourself to ensure your project is going to achieve what it hopes.
Thank you.
Great. And maybe Laura, you could drop in the chat a link to where people might be able to tune into your final presentation or project once it's done.
Okay. Thank you.
Want. Thanks for coming. Thank you for sharing, and thank you everyone for turning this into a pop-up critique session. That's great. Awesome. Well, Daphna, you can't unmute, but certainly let us know in the chat if there was a thing that brought you here today. But perhaps we could go back to where we started with Daniela's introduction. You were sharing, Daniela, that your interest is in a respectful co-creation with textile artists, and that you're going to be heading to Peru. I know, myself, I've been involved in projects and in fieldwork research, and so has Pame, who's here, and perhaps others. So yeah, what particular questions are taking you to Peru, and would you like any feedback on that front?
Yes, well, this is this has been a development that's just kind of unfolded in the last week. So I'm looking at a few different options to do my work in Peru, a few different locations. One of them being in Cusco, the Center for Textiles in Cusco. That seems to be the main one. But if anybody else knows some kind of centers or kind of organizations there, I'd be very happy to hear and receive. Yeah, I think For me, I have such a strong gravitation towards this field, and I think I've worked in the sector outside of my studies, but I don't think I've had a very like direct immersion. And so I can read about it in books and you know work with it over the computer from a distance. But I think until I really have more of that kind of immersive experience to really understand on the ground, you know, the lived experience, then it all just seems a little bit distant and not embodied. Um, and and so yeah, there is an interest in respectful co-creation. I guess I'm also interested in kind of understanding more of the history of how Western dress and fashion has impacted the kind of erasure of indigenous dress practices and like the more of like the kind of a local economy too, and you know, potential pathways of regeneration of that, alongside of course, you know, the idea of you know, more of the kind of Western fashion market. But yeah, so these are just ideas. I'm actually submitting a project proposal within a week. So there's a lot of things that I'm kind of, and then with this, the intention to go to Peru this summer. So there's a lot of moving variables and parts, and a lot of my ideas are kind of still in the ethers, and I'm just now in the process of like bringing them through and fine tuning exactly the kind of angle I want to take, and then also the exact community and center that I want to kind of focus my energies on. So that's kind of where I'm at. Everything is still a little bit big picture, but I'm very open to just hearing or receiving other people's experience, and also if any recommendations for itself, I'm very open to hearing.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Daniela. Yeah, we've from the lab have been huge fans of that textile center in Cusco. Nilda, she founded it. She's the person who runs it. We've been in touch with her about trying to publish a case study on what they're doing and how they're doing it, because it's one of the few indigenous founded, indigenous run places like that they seem to have active marketplaces locally and globally, and seem to have a governance model that that we could all learn from, and we would love to amplify as a lab. So as you embark on the journey, let's make sure to keep in touch. Yeah, maybe we could allocate some of our research assistant funds so that you could you know, be connected with the lab, and maybe Nilda would be open to co-authoring a case study with us, or in some way publishing their story, if others haven't already. Maybe it's already been published and we're just not aware of it. That would be really invaluable. And as for your research interests, I want to make sure that people have pointed you to Laura Beltran Rubio. She's a graduate of the MA Fashion Studies.
Oh
And
yes, I follow her on Instagram.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
she's
So
beautiful. Yeah.
this is how I met her on Instagram, and we've stayed connected. But yeah, the way that she talks about indigenous dress in the context of fashion studies and contemporary fashion is really, I think it's really exciting and interesting.
Yeah, definitely, and yeah, very like open to connecting more on any needs with regards to the case study, because I'm following my intuition, and I'm just kind of letting the pieces fall into place. So yeah.
Right. Oh,
Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah. No, let's
yeah.
definitely keep the conversation going. Any other comments or questions for Daniela? You could maybe at a future Laura come and report back on how the trip went.
Yes, in the fall.
That would would be wonderful.
A few months later, I would love to do that. Yeah.
Great. Well, perhaps I'll jump to Shaumika, because you were talking about exploring, learning with a new community and or setting up a new set of infrastructures and one of the things that I'm most excited about the center in Cusco that Daniela might visit is in fact the fact that it is indigenous founded and indigenous run. And it's so rare that I see artisan run initiatives, artisan founded initiatives. With PAME, we've been exploring fundraising to do more work in Mexico around indigenous self-governance. And so I would encourage you, Shaumika, to look at that question of how this project is being started from a governance perspective. So in what way do artisan voices get centered? There could be a cooperative model, but in our research, the fact that something is called a cooperative often seems to be a marketing line and not necessarily truly cooperative. So I remember visiting one cooperative in the Colombian coffee region, and it was all these women weavers with one male person connected to the markets, finishing their designs, them
Yeah.
what to do, using the sewing machine, and relegating them to simply the weaving of what is called the Panama hat, the aguadeño hat. And through a workshop with them, us reflecting back to the artisans that they think, or they have been told, they are part of a cooperative, but there was no evidence of the elements that one would expect of a true cooperative in terms of how their voices can influence the decision making. So that certainly I would encourage you to take with you. And I'll also put in the chat the recent article I co-authored that kind of unpacks the default system of artisan brands from how they start to how they market their products, because it may serve as a guidepost of things to look for or ways to structure your work.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. That's interesting because this project started we started this project with the title Weavers Co-op, and that's become kind of problematic because people associate that with government weaving centers in India. And, not that all of those are bad, or, not that all of those are problematic, but that association, I think, is sort of incorrect and inaccurate. And so, yeah, so we're trying to learn from some of those government funded centers, because they're not, there are things to learn from them. And you might know that India does actually have a Ministry of Textiles in its official system, but of course some of that, the ways that certain things are handled are not always the most beneficial to artisans. But though, having said that, it does vary from state to state. And it also depends on who's running it at the time, and, all of those things. But we are very keen to, in fact, one of the reasons we want to work in this particular village is because the person who will be, I suppose, taking care of the space going forward is a weaver, and it's not a body that's separate. And he's a master weaver, and he does want to, to kind of promote that craft. Of course, we don't know how that's going to go exactly, because, things can shift and change. But that's where we are at the moment. so although the textile designer does work with these weavers for his, for his own products, the way that the place will be run is kind of, it will be run by them very much.
That's wonderful and interesting that that cooperative had appeared already in the name.
It had, yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
Can I
Daniela,
ask
want to
there's
make sure you're
an-
seeing, oh, Daniela, want to make sure you're seeing the resources that Pame is dropping in the
Oh.
chat for you.
Okay.
So Mika,
Sure.
you were going to say something?
Oh no, I think somebody else was saying
Okay.
something.
Daniela,
I
were you?
was just going to say,
Oh, Una.
Shamika, there's an organization, an NGO in India called Desert Weavers. I think it's
Okay.
Desert Weavers of India.
Mhm.
And they faced an issue that was brought up by Cynthia.
Yeah.
The weaving was confined to the men. The women were
okay.
there to gather the threads, dye the threads, prepare the looms, but
Yeah.
only men could weave. And this particular group does that one kind of weaving that's sort of similar to ikat, in that, the design is woven in on the loom with the way the threads are dyed. And it was only after the NGO was in there and one man became sick and he couldn't weave. And so the wife took over so the family could eat, that it began to be seen that women could indeed participate in the full process. But you might find, if you're able to read something about them, I can see if I can find a link for them that may be interesting to you as you pursue this.
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful. That's actually part of the mission is to ensure that. So in India, a female weaver is a non-traditional weaver. I mean, that's kind of that's what they're referred to as, because they don't receive training, in the traditional way through their parent, whereas a male weaver is, that they come from a lineage, and they actually have the name weaver in their name often, and they're kind of they're learning from their father usually. So there are a lot of non-traditional weaving programs to train women to weave, and actually, yeah. So one of the problems when you do have a traditional weaving village is getting, is making sure that the women aren't doing everything on the side of weaving, and that they're actually allowed to weave. So that's something we are trying to kind of push forward, but we'll have to see, because, this is a traditional weaving village. So I think it's been very successful in other contexts where like weaving has been used to create employment for women, or, where there isn't already a kind of traditional set of weavers in place. But also in some contexts, like in Kutch, I've actually met a number of male weavers who actively passed on their training to their daughters. And so I think it's a challenge, because it's it's a change of mindset issue. So yeah, but yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very important to me.
I don't know how to raise my hand, but can I speak if it's okay?
Go ahead, Shreya.
Yeah. There is a couple of things. One, when you were talking about gendered weaving, at least in India, from what I've seen, a lot of times it's because the way that you would weave it's like a workout. It's really cumbersome. And something else I heard recently, as far as I understood, after looking at a Palestinian brand that weaves the kafir scarves, which are increasingly becoming rare. One thing I read about them was that it's being compounded by the fact that this very cumbersome craft, which was kind of difficult on people, I mean, they're hoping probably to transition to something else, not as their decision, but as other people's decision, is that they are now being replaced by machines, which I know we've talked and heard about in many of the other lauras, but now the machines are going to be doing that weaving, which is like a pretty artist project, like process, whereas something like carpet weaving is mostly done by women because it's a much, you don't have to deal with like the heavy weights of the loom, at least the very, very traditional looms that are used in India still. So I was just gonna suggest that maybe looking at it from like the point of view of transitioning to machines because they feel like it's not great for people. Like the same way you do ikat, but they're saying now that people are going blind doing that craft, and it's probably not great for them. And so they're moving to like printing ikat, which is really not the same, but on some level, just that dynamic makes it a little difficult to think about. I just wanted to say that because I was listening to you talk about the handloom stuff, and I had been observing that recently.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Shreya. Well, it's been an hour. So thank you all so much for coming to today's Laura. Always nice to see those of you who come back, those of you who discover us anew. Nice to see you, and we'll be in touch.